This is a special talk for me every year. I love getting down into the details of what's happening in the industry, but I think I love even more the big themes and the big pictures and the major issues that you all are dealing with. Last year, as you know, we did not have a live in-person convention, but we did have a virtual convention, and there was a State of the Industry address even last year. These are the themes that I talked about last year: innovation, resilience, and adaptability. I talked about those because we thought we were kind of coming toward the end of a pandemic. In fact, as it turned out, we were just at the early stages of a pandemic. So I talked about a lot of these of specific issues last year, and I'm really not going to cover most of them this year, not because they're not important anymore. They are. They're tremendously important, in fact. But it's because everything I said last year is still essentially true on a lot of those big issues. So I'm going to cover and blitz through a few things that we talked about last year. But really this year we're going to go in a different direction. I'm going to talk about some things that were not even on the radar last year, that when we did our survey this year, which was completed just last month, scored incredibly high. Some of them you're going to be able to guess what they are. Some of them you may not be. There were some surprises, for me at least, in the data from last year. So a few of them just big picture. I cannot have this talk without talking about COVID and the effect of COVID this year. But I only have one slide this year. Last year I think we had 10 or something like that. How closely has COVID hit home in your business? Look at the change from last year to this year. Last year at this time, 47% of you said you had a confirmed diagnosis on your staff. By the end of this year, it's 86%. The number of hospitalizations has grown, more deaths in the family, illness among your families. It's been a major thing, and I don't want to minimize that. It still is. It has been a tragedy for many of us. But those themes from last year, resilience and adaptability, are still in play in our industry. Let's just look quickly at some of the very top line results on distributors and contractors. Where does your revenue come from? We are still a heavily oriented retail business. Every year I get up here and I say, maybe that's going to change. Maybe that trend is going to change. It hasn't. 55% of you still say that retail fueling is your primary source of revenue. Fleet fueling, the order is still the same. Retail, fleet, government, and everything else is the way that works. How's business? Every year we ask on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the worst year ever and 10 being the best year ever, how would you rate this year? This year it was 6.77, and I confess a little bit of surprise to that, but only before I started thinking about it. Because what I hear you say when we talk and have conversations is, business is booming, business is fantastic, we have more work than we can do, and those are all true. I think what this reflects is some non-bottom line issues that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes that have made the year more stressful. Not necessarily less profitable, but more stressful. So I think this number reflects not just bottom line, but some of those other issues. What's going well? Commercial work generally, aging UST system upgrades, we'll talk about that briefly in a little bit, retail work and EMV. No surprise on any of those. You would expect to see that. Top line for manufacturers, how's business? Same kind of thing. Not a record-breaking number at all, even though business has been really good. And again, I suspect that it is reflecting some non-bottom line issues. What's going well for manufacturers? Aging infrastructure upgrades, a little broader than just the UST side. Not every manufacturer is involved in UST system components. New products, international sales, and retail construction. So, aging UST systems. This was a major part of last year's presentation, and I do have a few slides on this, not as many as last year, but it truly is a defining development in our industry and will be for some time to come. If you saw the presentation last year, which by the way is still up on our YouTube channel, you might want to look at it. We talked last year about the number of open underground storage tank systems installed from 1988 to 1998, with that date being important because that means they are reaching the end of their 30-year warranty. almost 200,000 tanks reach the end of their warranty, or were installed then and are coming to the end of their warranty. Year by year, here's what it looks like. From 2021 to 2030, the number of open tanks that are going to reach the end of their warranty, that is a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity at a couple levels. One is just the potential revenue and income, but the other is just environmentally. It's going to be terrific to be able to get some new tanks in the ground at a pretty aggressive pace. We asked the question, are tank replacements increasing for you and your business? Every one of the last 4 years, it's going up and up and up and up, and that's certainly continued this year. So my prediction, if you will, is that what could be a 10-year opportunity window is actually going to be longer. I think it's going to extend for the next 15 or 18 years probably, because when a tank reaches the end of its warranty, that's one factor as to why it might be replaced. Not the only factor. There's how many compartments do the tanks have? What's the gallon capacity? What's the store's plans? Is there a new construction that's going on? A lot of factors, but age is certainly one of them. So we're going to see that continue for some years to come. Now, here's our first big new category that I wanted to talk about. And I bet you all expected to hear about this. I mean, how could you not? By way of comparison, last year, here's what you said were the biggest issues affecting your business last year. Skilled labor, profit margins, manufacturer-distributor relations, EMV upgrades, UST testing inspection. Notice what's not on there. What didn't even register last year? Here's what it looked like this year. 90.8% of you said supply chain was the biggest issue affecting you. Isn't that amazing? From 1 year to the next, from not even registering to 90% of you saying it's the biggest issue affecting your business. Sometimes words tell a story even better than numbers, or at least in a different way. Here's some words that you said in our survey. One of you said, I'm very concerned supply chain issues are going to cripple our industry. That's a really emotional statement, but at a heartfelt level. Another one of you said, we're booking contracts at this time with projected start dates 7 to 8 months from now. Some of you might say, 7 to 8 months sounds pretty good to me, actually. Could be even longer than that. Another one of you said, it's difficult to quote a firm competitive price to a customer without an escalation clause. Type of contracts you didn't used to have to think about, now you do have to think about, and you have to think about it almost every time. Another one, this is a person who's really having a tough day. We're required to honor commitments to our customers, but our suppliers do not care. That's a pretty emotional day. I want to just sort of pat that person on the back and say, come on, it's going to be okay. But here's what it looks like numerically. We ask, so supply chain disruptions is a big overall category, but what specifically does that mean for you? What specifically has that meant for you this year? And here's what you report. Any one of these, I'm not going to read each one of them, but any one of them by themselves would be a major problem, but they're all happening at once. Job delays, price increases you can and have to pass on to your customers. Couple down, price increases that you could not pass on to your customers. I think maybe the most telling one on here is the one right after that, customer dissatisfaction. And that's one of those factors that I was saying a minute ago when you look back at the year, and even though the bottom line might be great, that you guys did not say it was a record-breaking year in terms of overall results. I think this is a big one. If customers are dissatisfied, and understandably so, if there's a store they want to open or a retrofit that they want to do, or an EMV upgrade that they might want to do, we'll talk about that in a minute too, that makes for some problems. So the supply chain is not an abstract issue. It's a very practical issue that's resulted in very practical problems to cover. This is another one that surprised me as well. We asked the question, as compared to 3 months ago, supply chain disruptions are getting better, about the same, or getting worse. I really thought things were going to be getting better. I thought that's what we were going to see. That's not what you said when we asked the question. You said it's about the same or it's worse in large measure. And the conversations that I've had here in Chicago over the last couple of days seem to confirm that. So we got a long way to go. It's not going to be solved in the next couple of months. It's going to happen in 2022 as well. Next year when Jason stands up here, he's probably going to be talking about supply chain issues as well and where that stands. Okay, second issue that wasn't on the radar at all last year that I do want to give some emphasis to is cybersecurity. Big picture, it's not just a PEI problem. It's a worldwide problem, and it's a problem in every business sector you can imagine. Just a couple of quotes and statistics from very recognized organizations in terms of companies who say this is a big problem and it's only getting bigger, and the emergence of remote work this year has only made it work. People are working out of their home without the network protections they might have in the office. So here's our first question on this front. In the past 12 months, has your company been victimized by any form of cyber attack? This question was not to say, did you receive an email from a Nigerian prince? But rather, were you damaged in some way by an email from a Nigerian prince or some other source? So normally you would look at a little bar graph like this and you'd say, well, the important number is 70% said no. I think the important number is that 30% of you said yes. That's a huge number in a 12-month period to have suffered a problem. What damages have you suffered? We wanted to go a little bit deeper. 50% of the people who had been damaged said some of their confidential company data was exposed. 18% made ransomware payments. I talked to someone yesterday who I know well and did not know they had to make a ransomware payment. And the description was, well, it was only $20,000. But still, that's a lot of money, first of all. Second of all, just the fact that it happened. Fraudulent invoice payments, huge issue right now. You receive an invoice, looks like it's a legitimate one, looks like it's from your customer, you pay it and it's not. Reputational damage. If word gets out that you have suffered an attack in some way. And the last one is perhaps even the most damaging because it hurts your people. Exposure of employees' personally identifiable information. So cybersecurity is a real problem. Then we ask, what precautions have you taken to guard against it? I'm not going to read all of these again, but it starts with network security investments. And then down at the bottom, the ones that I've put in red, I've highlighted these: retaining network security firm or boosting internal IT staff, because I would suggest that those numbers ought to be a lot higher. This is such an evolving area right now. Whatever infrastructure, hard assets you put in place right now to protect yourself probably aren't going to be adequate a month from now or 6 months now from a year from now. So I personally believe that beefing up your internal and external support is critical. We certainly have, as a PEI staff this year, done some major things and brought in some outside help on that, and I would encourage you to consider that as well. And then I sort of like this question: have you purchased cyber insurance? 51% said no, 38% yes, and 10% said, I don't know. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. Maybe there's a line somewhere in a policy we have that would suggest we have it. You might want to go back and read your insurance policies, would be my suggestion on that. And then this question: how confident are you in your current security policies? Very confident, somewhat confident, not confident at all. I don't want to suggest that category 1 and 2 you're delusional, but you might be. I mean, there is so much danger out there, and again, so much risk. The good news is help is on the way. PEI is going to announce this month a cyber insurance affinity program from a trusted partner that's kind of personalized to our needs. To take a look at it, I would just encourage you to be watching for that. Whether you look at a PEI connected policy or not, I would just encourage you to consider cyber insurance. The risks are just too great. All right, we're moving on to electric vehicle charging. Have to talk about this year. It's a big topic in society as a whole, and it certainly is a big topic in our members. And some surprises here, which I'll show you in just a moment. How are EV sales going right now? Pretty darn well. Thank you for asking. In the first and second quarter of 2021, look at the sales. 214,000 battery-powered electric vehicles were sold as compared to 98,000 a year ago. Granted, a year ago is a tough year in a lot of ways. The more important number is the next line, that the market share has grown from 1.5% to 2.5% in that 1 year, and it's accelerating. If you look even on a month-to-month basis, it's even higher than 2.5, so that's growing. Why is that so? Two reasons, really. One is that more electric vehicles that people want are being made. It used to be a rich person's game. You had to buy a $100,000 Tesla or whatever that. It priced everybody out of the market, or many people out of the market. Now, there are more and more vehicles being bought or being made that people, regular people, can actually buy. The biggest and most recent announcement being the F-150 Lightning. 130,000 reservations for that truck as of a week or two ago. Now, granted, those reservations, you have to put $100 down. It is refundable, but it's a commitment still that people are making, and there is a lot of excitement about that vehicle. There's a high end at $90,000 price tag, but the low end at $40,000 is sounding a lot like the prices that you might normally pay for a vehicle like that. So that's one reason. Second reason that I think that sales are accelerating is the tremendous progress that's being made on range. This year, 8 electric vehicles on the market of the 2022 model year are rated, EPA rated, at 300-mile range, with the highest being 516 miles and the second highest being 405 miles. It's a lot farther than my car goes right now, my internal combustion car. A year ago, there were only 3 vehicles that could do that. So that shows you the progress in the 1 year, and I think that has a lot to do with the growth in sales. Now, here was the surprise that I hinted at a minute ago. To what extent are you, distributors and contractors, involved in EV charging station installation and/or service? For the last 2 years prior to this one, we saw an exponential growth in the number of our members who were involved in that work, from 3.5% to 7.9% to 24%, and it's plateaued this year. I expected to see that number go higher. It did not, but look at the next line. That's the line to watch. We still have 30% saying, I'm not involved yet, but I'm planning to be. Will they or won't they? I don't know. But that number is there, and that's what I would encourage you to watch. Even our board meeting the other day, there was a fair amount of discussion on this topic. And one of the things that we heard was members who were doing it, who were talking about the surprising amount of service that these charging stations require. That it's not just you drop it in and you walk away and it runs on its own for 20 years. Tremendous kind of issues. The kinds of things that you folks are good at. Knowing how to address maintenance issues with different kinds of fueling systems, knowing how electronics interact, knowing how they can or can't be placed in an existing facility. This slide is interesting as well, I think. We asked, well, where have you PEI members who are doing this, where have you installed EV charging stations? Convenience stores, those first 2 lines, 42% were at convenience stores. The balance was at other locations besides convenience stores. Government facilities, commercial office buildings, public parking lots, garages, shopping centers, restaurants. By the way, this doesn't add up to 100% because there's a little other category that I didn't list that was a few percentage points. I think that's an encouraging and even kind of exciting number right there. Because it means it's opening you up to new types of customers and new types of businesses. So when I said early in the presentation that 55% of your work is still retail oriented, but there were some signs that maybe that could change. This is one of those signs. If you're doing different kinds of work and having different kinds of customers, there is certainly the potential for that. How profitable is the EV charging station work? extremely profitable, 0%. Roughly, I may have rounded that, roughly 0%. You know, and I laugh too when I say that, but look at the next line. 66% of you said it is profitable work. It has been for us, and 23% said break even. And that's in the early stages before systems have been developed and processes to do this work well. So that's another reason that many of you may want to consider this, that it can be a profitable source of work. Every other economic aspect of electric vehicles right now makes no sense at all. We haven't figured out road use taxes, we haven't figured out ROI for the facilities that have the charging station, but at least in terms of installation and service, there is the potential for profit there. And then another piece of news. This was actually announced yesterday, but PEI, in partnership with NACS and the Fuels Institute, this week at convention released 2 resources that could be valuable to you. One is called Future-Proofing Convenience Stores for Electric Vehicle Charging. This is for a ground-up facility. What are the factors that you have to look at to make a new build adaptable to electric vehicle charging whenever the time might be right? Property ownership, utilities, zoning, a couple of other factors there. And then there's a second document. These are, I think, 5 or 6 page white papers, both of them, on retrofitting C-stores. Again, the factors you have to look at, including that last one, the customer experience. I mean, can you shoehorn in an electric vehicle charging station, but in a way that would be incredibly inconvenient for the customers? How do you deal with that? So I encourage you to get those. They can be downloaded through the app, the Convention app. They can be downloaded from our site. They're on the Fuels Institute site, and I encourage you to look for those. EMV forecourt upgrades, another factor that we can't ignore. We have gone from the deadline is coming, to the deadline has been delayed, to the deadline is here, to now we're past the deadline, and where do we stand as an industry on these upgrades? Here's what it looks like. And by the way, the distributors and contractors who participated in this survey collectively service about 50,000 stores. So that's the scale here. It's a pretty good sample, I think. 153,000 retail fueling facilities in the country. This represents our survey of stores, about 50,000. So from April, that's actually should be April 2021, we had 56% of the stores completed, and by October that was 65% completed. 24% still hadn't placed the orders, 10% are in process. That's where we stood right then. Lead time is still way up there, 10 weeks or more if it requires new dispensers. And here is, we have always asked the question, what's the primary reason that someone may not reach the deadline? One huge change this year related to what we have already talked about. Last year, only 8.5% said that equipment shortages was one of the reasons. This year, that jumped up to 28%. So for those stores, those owner-operators who waited this long, now they're really in trouble, because not only did they wait, and not only is it past the deadline, but now there really are equipment shortages and delays that have to be taken into account. All right, we end the survey every year with just a couple of forward-looking questions for the near term and a slightly longer term. How do you feel about next year? These are solid numbers, 6.44 on the 10 scale, with 10 being the best, but it's not record-setting. Same principle as I talked about earlier, that there just are a lot of stresses going on out there in the industry right now. For manufacturers, a little bit higher, but still down from the previous year. And then what about the next 3 years? A little more optimism, looking slightly down the line. Again, not record-breaking numbers, but good, solid results, I think. So that's kind of the look at where we are. That's kind of the look forward. Now, it's customary to end a presentation like this saying thank you, and so thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to stand here. Thank you, Steve, for your kind words. Thank you, Ron, for your kind words. And thanks to all of you for the privilege of serving as your executive vice president and as her PI. It's been an honor and a joy, and thanks to so many of you who have written notes and called and the like, it means a lot to me. So thank you very much.